so we can start the game. Go ahead. Let's clear the field so we can start the game.
Welcome to Clear the Field, a podcast about when baseball goes sideways. I am Ted Walker, co-host of the podcast Take Note. I'm here with Paul Jackson, the historian, writer, and storyteller behind the Project 318 newsletter on Substack. In the newsletter and here on Clear the Field, Paul cultivates a rookery of the finest baseball stories of yore and sets them free to alight upon our collective shoulders. A quick programming note, Clear the Field will be on summer break for the next few weeks. We have a new episode that will land on August 18th. We hope everybody's having a great summer. We're going to take a little time to enjoy ours as well. But in this episode, a Yankee brains a seagull by the seashore.
So, Ted, the Leslie Street Spit extends about 5 kilometers into Lake Ontario off of Leslie Street in Toronto's East End. So this is a Canada story. Beginning in 1959, Toronto built the spit with debris from construction projects throughout the city. They were trying to create a protective breakwater for the city's outer harbor as old row homes and commercial buildings were being demolished to make way for modern Toronto. Tons of old brick and other material ended up in the spit. But when the outer harbor never developed as a shipping hub, there was no longer any need to develop all this newly created land. So it was just used as landfill. With no infrastructure to support people and no real reason for humans to be there at all, Toronto didn't bother creating public access to the spit. As late as 1973, you couldn't reach it unless you had a boat or wings. In modern times, Canadian naturalists have designated the Leslie Street Spit as an important bird area. 300 species of birds have been identified on the spit, including herons, cormorants, terns, swans, owls, and gulls. Because many gulls do not want to nest in areas where there's lots of vegetation, the newly created spit quickly became a seabird's paradise. The birds moved in and secured the site for generations that would follow. By 1983, when this story takes place, tens of thousands of gulls made their home at the site. At that time, the spit was home to 6% of all of the ring-billed gulls living in the world.
Just begs the question, where do the other 94% live? It's another episode.
That's another podcast altogether. But it is a very good question. So a word here, Ted, on nomenclature. If I had to learn it, so do you. The term seagull is actually just a catch-all term for any bird from the entire Laridae family, which includes 54 different species of gulls. The bird that you or I recognize as a quote-unquote seagull differ depending on where we live. So in Toronto, any bird being referred to as a seagull is likely to be a ring-billed gull.
They're all just stealing our fries no matter what we call them.
Yeah, some things are universal. That's very true. So about 9 kilometers, remember, Ted, this is a Canada story. We're in kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
About 9 kilometers west of the spit, as the gull flies past the inner harbor area and the CN Tower, sits what is today called BMO Field, an outdoor stadium for several different versions of football. The field is roughly 2 parking lots from the edge of Lake Ontario. In 1983, a different stadium stood on that site, Exhibition Stadium, first home of the Toronto Blue Jays. The expansion Blue Jays were created in 1977, and Exhibition Stadium and baseball were kind of an awkward match at first. According to the first president of the Blue Jays, a guy named Paul Beeston, not only was Exhibition Stadium the worst ballpark in baseball, it was the worst stadium in sports. And this is the guy whose team is going to play there all the time.
Sounds like somebody angling for a new stadium deal right
Yeah. Okay. I see some gamesmanship.
there.
The facility was originally built for Canadian football, and many of the seats there were poorly situated for watching baseball. And the team often had no choice but to close those seats off unless the Jays made the playoffs. Plus, the spring weather in Toronto could be a bit biblical, let's say. Toronto is actually further south than many parts of many American states, including all of North Dakota. But its position on Lake Ontario makes for some hard springs. The first Jays home opener was played on snowpack. A game in 1984 was canceled due to winds so strong the pitchers couldn't stay on the mound. Evening fogs so thick that fly balls drop in the outfield unseen. So we'll just call this Candlestick East, I think. And there were the birds, mostly gulls, visiting from the nearby Leslie Street Spit. The Spit gulls came in large numbers, bringing large appetites and absolutely no fear of people. The closed-off outfield sections left plenty of room for the birds to gather during those games. And with that home base established, they would use the grandstands as a restaurant and the playing field as a spot to just get away from it all for a few minutes. One regular ticket holder in 1983 vividly described the menace that the gulls had become to sporting events at the X.
He said the gulls would, sorry, Canadian accent, give me a second. The gulls would glide in and attempt to snatch popcorn from us at every chance. If a hot dog bun dropped between the seats, dozens of crazed gulls would dive in to devour every morsel in sight. It's been a while since I've been to Canada.
Well, you're recalibrating. It's okay. In early August of 1983, the New York Yankees were in town for a 4-game series with the Blue Jays. It had not thus far been a fun visit for the Yanks. They had lost the first 3 games of this series. But August 4 seemed like a better opportunity for the team and its center fielder, Dave Winfield, who singled in a run in the first inning and doubled in another run in the third. It was a warm, foggy night, and as usual, dozens of gulls wheeled around the field, occasionally coming to rest on the outfield turf. By the 5th inning of this game, the score was 3-1 for the Yankees. As the Yankees took the field again, Winfield warmed up by playing catch with left fielder Don Baylor. When they were finished, Winfield threw that baseball towards the right field foul line, where bat boy Jeff Pinchuk waited by the Yankees bullpen to collect it as per usual.
I think at this point in the story, it's worth reflecting on Dave Winfield for a minute. He was not a contemporary to me in his playing days, but I think his reputation still came with him. Larger than life, a smile as bright as a billboard on Broadway, a lovable giant of a man who I've always had absolutely positive connotations to and for and with. That's all. Wanted to reflect on that for a second, but he's thrown a baseball towards the bat boy down the right field line.
And one of the bigger stars in baseball at this junction of 1983. I think that's not worth missing either. So yes, thank you. And it's going to be an interesting time when we have the name of the bat boy. So this is where accounts begin to differ a little bit. All parties agree that there was a ring-billed gull sitting somewhere in the vicinity of the right field foul line, but some have it perched on a fence, while most accounts, including Winfield's, place the bird on the turf. Everyone agrees that Winfield threw that baseball, but not on how he threw it or where he aimed it. The throw traveled about 80 paces. It missed Pinchuk, the bat boy, by a lot. It bounced, and then it hit the unsuspecting gull. And the Yankees pitching coach, Jeff Torborg, was right there in the nearby bullpen. He saw the whole thing.
And he would describe it as pow, right in the head. The bird went poof.
I was wondering how you were going to do that onomatopoeia. Really well done there.
Thank you.
There were a few minutes of shocked confusion, and then Pinchuk carried the stricken gull away in a towel. Dave Winfield stood in center field, and he watched with his hands spread, his palms kind of out in front of him. At one point, he took off his cap and put it over his heart.
Never a good sign on a baseball field. Unless the national anthem is playing.
Right. So another person saw this whole thing go down. A Toronto police constable, your third Canada reminder, I think. Constable Wayne Hartery saw this happen. He was an off-duty police officer who was working a contract security shift near the right field bullpen. And in 2013, Hartery told the Toronto Star what he thought had transpired. And he said, every inning up until this inning, Winfield would get the ball and throw it into the ball boy sitting beside me. That ball would roll into that bat boy at about 1 mile an hour. There was just enough heat on that ball to make it. And on this inning, and I can't prove what he said, but he turned to Don Baylor when he picked up the ball. And again, I can't prove it, but I know he said, watch this. Then he turned with everything he had and he threw that ball. At the time, and again in 2013, Dave Winfield said it was an accident. He said, when I finished playing catch, I was throwing it to the ball boy. They sit down the right field line. I saw the bird in that direction. I threw in that direction, but really not anticipating or expecting to hit it. I threw it with some force to get it to the ball boy. Sure enough, the bird, it just killed it immediately.
See, Torborg jumps back into the fray with, that bird didn't look right to begin with. Didn't you see how its feet sort of skidded out underneath when it landed? I love everybody's a bird expert all of a sudden. As soon as a bird
needs more jobs out there, I think. He knows way too much about what's going on with individual birds. But both Constable Hartery and Torborg stated that the bird's behavior had been somewhat unusual in that it had not moved for several innings.
If you've ever wondered what baseball players talk about during the game. Hey, see that bird? Has that bird moved in a couple innings? I don't think so.
Hey, Jeff, when that bird move? Winfield had noticed this as well. And he said in 2013, it was on the ground. It had been there for a while between innings. And he kind of summed it up like this. He said, sometimes birds scatter as an object comes towards them, whether it's a car or a baseball. I would kind of liken it to if you're driving down the street and you see a squirrel or a raccoon or something and you're driving pretty quickly and you say, it'll move. And you hear the thump and you say, oh, man. And that's kind of the way this unfolded. I didn't expect to hit it, but I did.
Well, and what did George Costanza say about us having a deal?
We have a deal. So we're in Toronto again, Ted. We're right on Lake Ontario. So there is some fog of war here. But nobody wants a fence sitter when a life has been lost. So let's go through the pertinent facts as I understand them, okay? Winfield was aware that he was throwing into the vicinity of a gull which had been in the same spot for several innings. Now, there is no concrete evidence that he intended to hit the gull, but by his own admission, he failed to take any extra care with his throw, putting the burden on the bird to move out of the way. So I think the official clear the field verdict in this case would be involuntary manslaughter, unless anybody could prove that there was something wrong with this bird. But how could anybody do that, right, Ted?
Well, as a now it seems to be a sort of an official adjudicator in this, I do reserve the right to suggest that nobody from Hartery to Jeff Torborg had any idea what they were talking about or any accuracy in regards to what any bird was doing at any point during the game. So that's my caveat. And
well, you have no future in the Toronto justice system, unfortunately. I hate to tell you.
Amazingly.
The game was actually being broadcast on local television and radio, and hundreds of thousands of potential bird lovers saw or heard what happened. Many of those people began calling these same radio and television stations, as well as the Toronto police. These people found a surprising champion in Constable Wayne Hartery. In Hartery's judgment, Winfield had just committed a crime, and he was in a unique position to do something about that. The constable remembered that 30,000 fans were keeping a Winfield sucks chant up for the better part of the remaining 4 innings of the game. Apparently, some fans who happened to have rubber balls on their person tried to turn the tables and throw these at Dave Winfield. Winfield acknowledged, said, the fans got on my case pretty bad. They always pick out the big guy. And he was, of course, a very big guy, the biggest guy for sure. In his playing years, he was 6 feet, 6 inches tall and 240 pounds. Jim Murray, who is a legendary sports writer out of Los Angeles, once said that Winfield looked like 40 home runs and 100 runs batted in waiting to happen. And he held a ball that looked like a conductor's wand in his hands. There was no question in this particular conflict who the little guy was, and it was not the human being. Winfield thought he got why the fans were so upset. He thought he hadn't just killed any bird, and he said, it was unfortunate about the bird, but also unintentional. I'm just sorry the national bird of Canada no longer exists. And unfortunately, this did not do much to quell the controversy because Canada did not have a national bird in 1983. Gaffes like this are kind of why baseball players are more thoroughly trained these days to never say anything.
Never mention a national bird, a national flower, a national park. I don't know, what are other national things?
I think the Fifth Amendment is a good plea in any country, no matter where you are. The game ended with a 3-1 New York win. Dave Winfield walked into the clubhouse, and he was greeted by more mocking boos, these from his teammates, some of whom cried murderer. He was changing when the Yankees manager, Billy Martin, told him that he had visitors waiting outside. And it was Constable Hartery and other plainclothes police officers. They took Winfield to a private room, and they informed him that he was being detained under Section 402, subsection 1A of the Canadian Criminal Code, causing unnecessary cruelty to an animal, which was punishable by a $500 fine and up to 6 months in jail.
They didn't have phones back then, so they had to carry around a large book of all the Canadian legal code.
This is a sidebar, Ted, but I love how the monetary penalties and the time-based penalties never come close to adding up.
6 months, 6 months of Dave Winfield's time. It doesn't quite sync up to 500 beans.
Or anybody's time, right? I mean, how much of your time is 6 months? 6 months of your time
at
worth?
Least $642, I would say.
At least. So word of what was happening made it to the Blue Jays organization, and their president, Beeston, and the general manager, Pat Gillick, arrived to try and smooth things over, but Constable Hartery was not having it. Winfield finished dressing, and he said to his teammates, well, I'll see you in 6 months. And obviously joking, but nobody laughed because crazier stuff had already happened that night. Winfield was taken to Toronto's District 14 police station to be processed. The arresting officer, Hartery, insisted in 2013 that this was standard protocol. He said that non-citizens were required to be held in jail until they posted bail, no matter the severity of the charges.
Hartery is emerging as a real villain in this story. It's almost giving me a Les Miserables feel. You know, you got Jean Valjean and you got, I'm not going to remember the guy's name at the moment.
Yeah, no,
there's a real a yin and yang, a real push and pull. They sort of recognize each other, but yet they're consumed with each other. It's just taking on epic proportions of a very large 19th century French novel.
You're spot on. My brain can tell you that Russell Crowe played him in
Javert, that's his name. Javert.
Javert.
I
Yes,
got
Inspector Javert. Inspector
Yes.
Javert, played by Russell Crowe. You're spot on. Total Javert vibes here. Hartery had retrieved the deceased gull from the ball boy who'd collected it, and now it was sitting on an officer's desk at the District 14 police stations, covered in a white towel. And nearby, Winfield was being read his rights.
And again, this is really a theme. You alluded to it earlier, but ball boys and the management of evidence in clear the field investigations. Boy, and now I'm going to make another literary reference. Agatha Christie, where is the ball boy? That should be the question at all times.
We have some of the weirdest running themes I think you could even imagine, even in our sideways niche that we are so happy. But ball boy evidence has been a theme for sure. Hartery remembered that Winfield was a total gentleman during the booking. He did not display a big shot attitude, according to the constable. He was polite, but not necessarily cooperative. He declined to participate in an interview without a lawyer present. And can you imagine being the lawyer getting that late night call from your client?
Collect call from Canada. Do you accept?
Back at Exhibition Stadium, the Yankees were stuck in limbo. They were supposed to fly out that night. Greg Nettles, the third baseman, said, "I could understand the fuss if it was a blue jay, but it was just a gate-crashing seagull." Billy Martin was sure that no crime had been committed, and he offered a one-liner that almost offset the life lost in the process of making it. He said of Winfield, "That's the first time he's hit the cutoff man all year."
Solid Martin work.
Beautiful. I think that's one of the more enduring lines, too, of this little story we're telling. So the Yankees manager had made vendettas out of far, far less, and he was fuming as the Yankees were waiting for Winfield. He said, "I'll tell you one thing, when Toronto comes down to New York next week, we're going to get their 4 starting pitchers arrested. We're going to have somebody call the police and say they were molested in the hotel." So Billy Martin is a creature of escalation. Yeah,
yes, that's a dark turn.
You slap that guy and you're going to get a knife between the ribs or something. At the District 14 station house, tipped-off reporters were trying to get a picture of Winfield through the windows of the station, looking for the angle that suggested maximum criminality. Meanwhile, he was reading a newspaper and waiting to post his $500 bail. He had only $200 in cash, so Pat Gillick, the Blue Jays general manager, stepped in to cover the remainder. Meanwhile, police officers were reportedly singing the Blue Jays theme song. I don't know what the Blue Jays theme song would have been in 1983. They were apparently ad-libbing some new verses fit for the occasion. Some other police were, according to the New York Times, asking Winfield for autographs. And even Hartery later said he regretted not asking for an autograph while he had a captive audience, so to speak.
And the Canadian police force jokes are just writing themselves at this point, stumbling over themselves to be as nice as humanly possible.
So arrangements were being made for the gull's remains. The police planned to work with the Humane Society, and Ted, I swear this is true, to have a forensic autopsy performed on the bird. That's a real thing that happens. The plan was to have the remains transported via a, quote, veterinary ambulance to a nearby college laboratory. Winfield was required to sign a paper saying he or a representative would return for a criminal court hearing some 8 days hence on August 12th. Shortly after midnight, he walked out of the police station, and in what I'm sure was an awkward silence, Pat Gillick drove him to the airport to reunite with the team waiting on the plane. And as Winfield boarded, his teammate Oscar Gamble shouted, "Break out the cuffs!" So the next day, August 5th was a long one for Toronto's civic leaders. The Metro Police were getting tons of calls from press across North America who did not believe the overnight news reports of what had happened. Had one of baseball's best paid players really been arrested for bird murder? Once they verified that the answer was yes, every talk show, radio show, and newspaper in 2 countries ran the story, working in at least one bird pun and one Canada joke. A radio station in San Francisco offered to provide a replacement gull from that city's own stock if Toronto dropped the charges against Winfield. And another commentator suggested that a target gull could be set up and Winfield given 100 baseballs with which to try and hit it. The Blue Jays could stage this as a kind of ballpark promotion. The Toronto authorities were already looking for a way out of this. The police chief said that he'd heard that Winfield was being arrested, but he thought it was a joke. The duty officers had reportedly tried to consult with the Crown Attorney. This is the equivalent of the American District Attorney, I think, before arresting Winfield. But that Crown Attorney, a lawyer named Norm Matusiak, did not get the message that they were looking to talk to him until after Winfield had been arrested. Matusiak was supposed to have the day off on August 5, but wouldn't you know it, he had to work and clean up Wayne Hardery's mess. That morning, he got together with 2 senior police officers to review the evidence in the case. He released a statement saying, after a careful reassessment and a lengthy phone conversation with Mr. Winfield, he would request that the charges be dropped and the bail money would be refunded. And Matusiak said, it's always a key issue to find criminal intent, and I'm satisfied there was none here. And Winfield said, I've been exonerated. NYPD officers were assigned to follow him around for the next few days, not to protect him from the bird lovers, but from the near frenzied New York media. The Yankees owner, George Steinbrenner, requested that Toronto authorities apologize to Winfield for the unnecessary and ill-advised treatment that he had suffered. Steinbrenner also filed a complaint with the American League, and he said, this is not the first time that seagulls have come to rest in the outfield at Exhibition Stadium. AL teams should not have to play games under these conditions. So, Ted, Toronto's mayor was a man named Art Eggleton. Say that again. Art Eggleton, Toronto mayor. Eggleton said he was considering a letter of apology. And the Toronto Metro chairman, a guy named Paul Godfrey, was already scheduled to be on vacation in New York, and he took it upon himself to embark on a diplomatic mission to Yankee Stadium.
See, what did Godfrey said he did? I'll be at the Blue Jays Yankees doubleheader in New York on Monday night, and if I can see Dave, I want to say I'm sorry. I don't believe for a moment a man of his stature and background of human relations skills would intentionally do a thing like that. It was most unfortunate that he was charged.
So this brings us back to the Javert of our story, Constable Hardery. Everyone above him is running away from his decision as fast as they can, as loudly as they can, saying the opposite. Hardery was never disciplined for arresting Winfield, and his superiors were careful to say that technically he had done nothing wrong. On August 9th, Godfrey met privately with Winfield between those games at Yankee Stadium and said publicly that he didn't think Winfield had gotten a fair shake. And Winfield accepted that apology and said, I don't think anybody came out of this looking very good. And that was nowhere true, more so than the gull. The autopsy results confirmed that the gull's cause of death was that it had been hit in the head with a baseball. So, good to know. But there is a little bit more to this, and there is an incredible Toronto Star retrospective on this incident. And the journalist that put that together actually got more details directly from the pathologist who examined the bird.
Amazing investigative work.
Stunning. And this report might have actually been enough to exonerate Winfield in court had the case ever gotten that far. Because remember, Ted, those reports that the bird, quote, didn't look right?
Of course, I remember them.
It turns out the pathologist thought that too. And tell us what he said.
He said it had reduced muscle mass, no fat, one of these young birds that was going to die within a week or 10 days. There was a little bacterial infection in its wing. A number of things were going on. It was a debilitated bird.
It was a debilitated bird. So a bird like that, so debilitated, would have struggled to get out of the way of even a casually thrown baseball.
Even a bat boy walking backwards could have killed that bird.
Absolutely. The possibility of death by misadventure here is extremely plausible. So we need to figure out what the Canadian standard is for reasonable doubt, ultimately. The evidence was never tested in court because the Crown Attorney showed up to the hearing. He was wearing a little seagull, a pin, apparently, and lapel pin, and he successfully had these charges against Winfield dropped. The hearing took about a minute of time. So in creating the Leslie Street Spit, Toronto's humans had accidentally set up a near perfect seabird production facility. And this created an airborne invasion of the city's recreational spaces. And not too long after this incident, Toronto's gulls were not faring well in the public eye themselves. Pretty soon, Toronto was fighting back against what many people felt like was an invasion from the air. The same day that those Winfield charges were dropped, a Toronto alderman was complaining that the gulls were fouling the beaches and parks and driving people away. And he requested that the city government hire ornithologists who could figure out how to put these birds on some kind of birth control. The gull population had gone from 10,000 to 200,000 in less than a decade. The Toronto Star polled its readers at the time, and half of them were in favor of population control. One respondent said, "Bring back Dave Winfield."
Classy.
By 1985, a regional mayor in the area had actually declared war on what were then being called the rats of the air. A organization called the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority installed fake predators at several of the gulls' preferred nesting sites. This included like taking a sawhorse and putting like a coyote hide over it and leaving it out there because birds are stupid, Ted. So with these brilliant measures and others, once the city got involved, the Leslie Street Spit gull population fell to roughly half of what it had once been, down to 70,000 birds.
I mean, crazy thing is the gulls started a legal case about the coyote because the coyote had just been standing there. That coyote hadn't moved. And did you see how the coyote's feet kind of slipped out from under it that one time?
Didn't look healthy. What a litigious country. So, postscript to this story, Winfield and several of his Yankee teammates returned to Toronto that same offseason of their own free will. They accepted invitations to participate in a sports celebrity dinner benefiting the Easter Seal Society. He was in a tux. Winfield told the audience he had been on quite a journey. And he said, "I feel like a mosquito in a nudist camp. I hardly know where to start." He assured the audience he had come back of his own free will and that he could leave at any time. And in addition to giving the speeches, the players were asked to contribute something to be auctioned off for charity, autographed bats, memorabilia, you know. But Winfield opted for a grander gesture. He had a lot of that Steinbrenner money, and he apparently owned a couple of art galleries at the time. So he had a very special painting commissioned, and it was extremely hard to find a picture of this painting, Ted, but I did it, and we will show it here. The inscription on the painting reads, "To the Canadian people committed to the preservation of their values and resources." It sold at approximately $30,000 Canadian at auction that night. The amends had been made, but fans in Toronto continued to flap their arms for Dave Winfield whenever he returned to visit in the years ahead. Things finally changed 9 years later in 1992 when Dave Winfield signed a one-year deal with the Blue Jays and became a key component in the team's first ever World Series title. Winning with Winnie turned those flaps into claps, and all was at last forgiven.
Clear the Field is produced by me, Ted Walker, based on research and original nonfiction writing by him, Paul Jackson. Support the podcast. Leave a rating and a review wherever you pod. Drop a comment on the Substack. We'd love to hear from you. And subscribe to the Project 318 newsletter on Substack, where Paul produces some of the best researched, most meticulous baseball stories that you'll find. And I do encourage you to subscribe. There's a new subscriber option. It's your way to support the amazing work that Paul does, support the podcast, but primarily the newsletter and all the research that goes into it. We'd love to hear from you either over on the Substack or email us at clearthefieldpod@gmail.com. Find more from me at takenote.space. And if you enjoyed this story, find many more just like it on Paul's Substack. Search Project 3.18 wherever you like to search for stuff. And thank you for listening.